The stars were burning. Not the slow, gentle burn of fusion that had lit the galaxy for billions of years, but the violent, angry burn of war. Ships exploded in silence across the black void, their deaths marked only by brief flashes of light that faded as quickly as they appeared. Admiral Kang Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the undying sun, watching his fleet die. He was an old man now, his hair white and his face lined with the weight of 17 years of endless battle. Around him, officers shouted orders and damage reports, but he heard none of it. His eyes were fixed on the enemy. The Pale Tide had no ships in any normal sense. They were machines, yes, but machines built by something so ancient and so alien that even calling them machines felt wrong. They moved like living things, flowing through space in waves of pale light, consuming everything they touched. They had come from beyond the galaxy, from the dark spaces between stars, and they had one purpose: to end all life. Humanity had tried to reason with them. They had tried to hide from them. They had tried everything. Nothing worked. The Pale Tide did not negotiate. The Pale Tide did not stop. The Pale Tide simply killed and killed and killed. "Admiral," said Captain Park Yuna, stepping to his side. She was young, brilliant, and exhausted. Dark circles hung under her eyes, and her uniform was wrinkled from days without sleep. "The Allied fleets have reached the evacuation corridor. The Turani, the Valesi, the Koth, they are all through. Their civilian ships are safe." Tae-ho nodded slowly. "How many of our ships remain?" 4,000, sir. Down from 12,000 this morning? 4,000 ships, 4,000 crews, millions of humans standing between the Pale Tide and the retreating Allied species. They had been fighting this battle for 17 years, and every day brought fewer ships and more enemies. "And the enemy?" Tae-ho asked. Yuna paused. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "Our censors cannot count them anymore. There are too many." Tae-ho closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come. He had prepared for it. But knowing and feeling were different things, and right now, he felt the weight of every life under his command, pressing down on his shoulders. "Begin Project Ember," he said. Yuna stared at him. "Sir, if we begin now, there will be no one left to hold the line. The Pale Tide will reach the Allied evacuation routes." "No," Tae-ho said. "We will hold the line. The main fleet will continue fighting. But our civilian ships, our colony vessels, our children, they will go to sleep. They will hide in places so deep and so dark that even the Pale Tide will not find them. And they will wait." "Wait for what, sir?" Tae-ho turned to look at her. In his eyes, there was something she had never seen before. Not despair, not hope, but something older, something patient. "For the Pale Tide to forget about us," he said. "For the galaxy to heal. For a time when humanity can rise again." Project Ember had been Yuna's creation. In secret, over the past decade, she had designed temporal stasis fields, bubbles of frozen time hidden inside dead moons and empty planets across 100 forgotten systems. Inside these bubbles, humans could sleep for thousands of years, maybe millions, without aging a single day. When they woke, it would feel like only a moment had passed. But for the plan to work, someone had to stay behind. Someone had to keep fighting, to keep the Pale Tide focused here while the sleepers escaped. "We will need volunteers," Yuna said softly. Tae-ho smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the young officer he had been 50 years ago, before the war, before the death. "Captain, look around you. Every human on these ships is a volunteer. We have always known what this mission meant." The evacuation took 3 months. While Tae-ho's fleet fought and died in the Orion Vale, colony ships slipped away into the darkness. They carried 200 million humans, children, families, scientists, artists, dreamers. They carried the genetic records of every human who had ever lived. They carried seeds and animals and books and music. They carried everything that made humanity what it was. And then they disappeared. One by one, they entered the hidden vaults, activated the stasis fields, and fell into a sleep that would last longer than most civilizations. The allied species watched from the safety of the galactic rim. The Tyranni wept, for they were an emotional people, and they understood what humanity was doing. The Valesi recorded everything, for they were archivists, and they believed that sacrifice should never be forgotten. The Koth said nothing, for they were warriors, and they had no words for what they were seeing. Humanity was choosing extinction to give the galaxy a chance to survive. On the final day, Kang Taeho stood on the bridge of the undying sun with only 800 ships remaining. The pale tide filled the sky from horizon to horizon, a wall of pale light that seemed to swallow the very stars. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "the Allied command is requesting a final message. They want to know what to tell future generations." Taeho thought for a long moment. He thought about his daughter, who was sleeping now in a vault somewhere beyond the reach of enemy sensors. He thought about his wife, who had died in the first year of the war. He thought about Earth, which had been consumed by the pale tide a decade ago. "Tell them this," he said finally. "We will sleep, and when we wake, we will remember." He closed the channel and gave his final order. "All ships, advance." The 800 ships of humanity's last fleet flew forward into the light. They flew without fear, without hesitation, and without hope of survival. They flew because they were human, and because humans did not know how to surrender. The pale tide consumed them all. For 1,000 years, the allied species remembered humanity. They built monuments and sang songs and told stories of the species that had died so they could live. But memory fades. Monuments crumble. Songs are forgotten. After 10,000 years, humanity was a legend. After 100,000 years, humanity was a myth. After 500,000 years, humanity was nothing but a strange word in old databases, a footnote in ancient history files that no one read. The galaxy moved on. New empires rose. New wars were fought. The pale tide, satisfied that all resistance had been crushed, retreated back into the darkness between galaxies. Life continued. And deep beneath the frozen crust of an unmarked moon, in a vault that had been silent for 500,000 years, a light flickered. Then another. Then 100 more. A countdown, set by Captain Park Yuna 500,000 years ago, reached 0. The humans were waking up. Lieutenant Bayek Su-min opened her eyes and saw darkness. For a long moment she did not know where she was. Her body felt strange, heavy and light at the same time, as if she had been swimming in deep water and had finally reached the surface. Her lungs burned as she took her first breath in 500,000 years. Then the lights came on, and she remembered everything. The stasis pod around her was old. Ancient, really. The metal was covered in a thin layer of frost, and the display screens flickered with warning messages in a language that felt both familiar and strange. "Emergency power," they said. "Awakening protocol active." "Welcome back, Lieutenant Bayek." Su-min pushed against the pod's lid. It did not move at first. 500,000 years of stillness had sealed it shut. But she was human, and humans were stubborn. She pushed harder, and the lid cracked open with a sound like breaking ice. Cold air rushed in. She climbed out of the pod and fell immediately, her legs too weak to hold her weight. For several minutes, she lay on the metal floor, shivering and breathing and trying to remember how to be alive. Around her, other pods were opening. Men and women climbed out, some crying, some laughing, some simply staring at nothing. They were soldiers, scientists, engineers, teachers. They were the survivors of a war that had ended before most stars in the sky had been born. A hand reached down to help her up. Su-min looked up and saw a man with a kind face and tired eyes. He wore the uniform of a commander, though the fabric was faded and worn. "Can you stand, Lieutenant?" he asked. "I think so, sir." "Good, because we have work to do." His name was Yun Han, and he had been asleep in the pod next to hers for 500,000 years. Before the long sleep, he had been a ship captain, commanding a destroyer in Admiral Kang's fleet. He had been one of the last to enter stasis, staying awake until the final evacuation ship had reached safety. Now, he was the highest-ranking officer in Vault 17, which made him responsible for the 300,000 humans who were slowly waking up around him. "What is our status?" Su-min asked as she followed him through the vast underground chamber. Everywhere she looked, there were stasis pods opening, humans emerging, medical teams rushing to help those who could not stand on their own. "We are alive," Han said. "That is more than I expected." He paused at a large display screen that showed a map of the galaxy. 47 vaults have responded to our awakening signal. That means at least 200 million of us survived the long sleep. 200 million. It sounded like a large number, but Su-min remembered that before the war, humanity had numbered in the trillions. They had filled 1,000 worlds. They had built stations around stars and cities in the clouds of gas giants. 200 million was not a population. It was a remnant. "And the ships?" she asked. Han smiled, and for a moment the exhaustion left his eyes. "Come with me." They walked for nearly an hour through tunnels carved into the moon's frozen rock. The air grew warmer as they moved deeper, and the lights grew brighter. Finally, they emerged into a cavern so large that Su-min could not see the far wall. Ships, thousands of ships, resting in neat rows like sleeping giants. Destroyers and cruisers and carriers, their hulls covered in dust, but their lights still blinking softly. They had been waiting here for 500,000 years, their reactors running on minimum power, their computers dreaming of the stars. 12,000 warships, Han said, give or take, plus transports, medical vessels, and construction ships. It is not what we had before the war, but it is enough to make a start. Su-min stared at the fleet. These ships were ancient, older than any civilization in the galaxy. Their weapons were outdated, their armor was primitive, their engines were slow. And yet, looking at them, she felt something stir in her chest. Hope, maybe, or pride. "Commander," she said, "what happens now?" Before Han could answer, a young engineer came running toward them. Her name was Choi Nari, and she was holding a tablet that displayed strange symbols and readings that Su-min did not understand. "Commander Yun, you need to see this," Nari said. She was breathing hard, and her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "I was running diagnostics on the stasis network, and I found something. During the long sleep, our neural implants were not completely inactive. They were connected to each other through quantum links. We were dreaming together." Han frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean that for 500,000 years our minds were linked in a shared dream space. We were learning, Commander, solving problems, developing new theories. Our unconscious minds kept working even while our bodies slept." She held up the tablet. "Look at this. We have designs for weapons that should be impossible, navigation systems that can fold space, power sources that draw energy from the fabric of reality itself." Su-min felt a chill run down her spine. "You are saying that we are not the same as we were before?" "I am saying that we have been evolving," Nari said. "Not our bodies, our minds. We spent 500,000 years dreaming together, and in those dreams, we became something more." Commander Yun was silent for a long moment. He looked at the fleet of sleeping ships, then at the thousands of humans who were waking up throughout the vault. then at the tablet in Nari's hands. "The galaxy has forgotten us," he said quietly. "We do not know what has happened in the 500,000 years since we fell asleep. We do not know if the pale tide is still out there, or if new enemies have risen, or if the species we saved even remember our sacrifice." He turned to face Su-Min and Nari, and his eyes were hard with determination. "But we are still human, and humans do not hide in the dark forever. Prepare the fleet. Wake everyone. It is time to see what the galaxy has become." 3 days later, the first human ship in 500,000 years left the vault and flew into open space. Its name was the New Dawn, and Lieutenant Baek Su-Min stood on its bridge, watching the stars that her ancestors had died to protect. They were still there, burning in the darkness, waiting for humanity to return. And now, at last, humanity had returned. Captain Vrex of the Torani species had served in the Dominion Navy for 40 years. He had seen pirates and rebels and strange things floating in the void. He thought he had seen everything the galaxy could show him. He was wrong. "Captain," said his sensor officer, a young Valesi with trembling hands, "we are detecting a fleet emerging from the hollow system." Vrex looked up from his command chair. The hollow system was dead. It had been dead for as long as anyone could remember, a collection of burned-out planets and frozen moons orbiting a dim red star. No one went there. There was nothing there worth seeing. "How many ships?" Vrex asked. The Valesi checked his readings twice before answering. 12,000, Captain, and more arriving every minute." Vrex felt his blood turn cold. 12,000 ships was not a patrol or a trading convoy. 12,000 ships was an invasion fleet. He activated his communication systems and prepared to send an emergency message to Dominion Command. Then the unknown fleet sent a message first. The voice that came through the speakers was strange. It spoke a language that Vrex did not recognize at first. An old language, a dead language, the kind of thing only scholars and historians knew. His translation system took several seconds to process it, searching through ancient databases for a match. When the translation finally appeared on his screen, Vrex stopped breathing. "We are the humans. We have returned. We wish to know, does anyone remember us?" Humans. Vrex knew that word. Everyone knew that word, even if they did not know what it meant. It was a curse word in some cultures, a prayer in others. It was the name of ghosts, of monsters, of ancient gods who had died before the galaxy was young. "Captain," whispered his first officer, "humans are a myth. They are not real." Vrex did not answer. He was staring at his sensor screen, watching as more and more ships appeared from the dead system. They were massive, far larger than any Dominion vessel. Their hulls were black and angular, covered in strange symbols and what looked like millions of years of cosmic dust. They moved slowly, heavily, like creatures waking from a very long sleep. "Hail them," Vrex said. His voice was shaking, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Ask them what they want." The response came from a young woman with dark hair and tired eyes. She wore a uniform that no living being had seen in 500,000 years. Behind her, through the viewport of her ship, Vrex could see stars that had been old when his species was still learning to use fire. "I am Lieutenant Baek Su-Min of the Human Recovery Fleet," she said. "We have been asleep for a very long time. We have many questions about what has happened to the galaxy since we left, but first we need to know, do you remember us? Do you remember what we did?" Vrex opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He did not know what she was talking about. He did not know what humanity had done. All he knew was the fear that was spreading through his crew like a disease. Behind him, his communications officer made a sound of horror. "Captain, automated warning systems are activating across the ship. Ancient protocols buried in our oldest databases. They are triggered by the word human." "What do the warnings say?" The officer read from his screen, his voice barely a whisper. If the humans wake, tell them we are sorry. Tell them we tried to remember. Tell them we failed. Sumin saw the confusion on the alien captain's face, and she felt her heart sink. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that someone would remember, that after 500,000 years, the galaxy would still know what humanity had sacrificed. But the alien looked at her like she was a ghost, or worse, a monster. They do not remember, she said quietly to Commander Yoon, who stood beside her on the bridge of the New Dawn. Whatever we did, whatever we gave up, they have forgotten it all. Yoon's face was hard, but his eyes were sad. 500,000 years is a long time, Lieutenant. Longer than most species exist. It was always possible that our memory would fade. But the warnings in their systems, someone tried to make them remember. Someone left messages. Yes, Yoon said, and someone else erased them. Look at his face, Lieutenant. He is not just confused. He is afraid. Something happened after we fell asleep. Something that made the galaxy want to forget us. Before Sumin could respond, a new message came through their communication systems. This one did not come from the Dominion patrol ship. It came from deeper in space, from a source that identified itself as Dominion High Command. Attention, unknown fleet. You have entered Dominion space without authorization. You will surrender your vessels immediately and submit to inspection. If you refuse, you will be destroyed. Sumin stared at the message in disbelief. They are threatening us? We just woke up. We have not done anything. But it was not Yoon who answered her. It was Oh-Ji-Wan, their chief historian, a thin old man who had been studying the galaxy's communication networks since the moment they had woken up. Lieutenant, Ji-Wan said, I have been going through the Dominion's historical archives. What I have found is disturbing. He pulled up a series of documents on the main screen. There are almost no records of humanity in their databases. A few scattered references, mostly classified, but I found this. The screen showed an official document, stamped with the seals of 12 different species. It was 500,000 years old, and it was titled, The Erasure Mandate. After we fell asleep, Ji-Wan said, the species we saved formed the Dominion. One of their first acts was to delete all records of humanity from galactic history. They destroyed our monuments. They burned our books. They made it illegal to speak our name. Why? Sumin asked. We saved them. We died for them. Ji-Wan's voice was bitter. Because they were afraid. Afraid that we would return. Afraid that we would be angry. Afraid that we would expect gratitude they were not willing to give. He turned to look at Commander Yoon. They did not forget us, Commander. They chose to erase us. The bridge was silent. Outside, the Dominion patrol ship was still waiting for a response. In the distance, more Dominion ships were arriving, their weapons powered and their shields raised. Commander Yoon stood very still for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and cold. So they erased us from history. They pretended we never existed. They took our sacrifice and buried it in darkness. He looked out at the stars. That is their choice. But we are here now. We are awake, and no amount of fear or lies will put us back to sleep. He turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to the Dominion fleet. Tell them we have no interest in war. Tell them we have come with a warning. And tell them that whether they remember us or not, we remember them, and we will protect them anyway, because that is what humans do. The message was sent. The galaxy held its breath. And humanity, 500,000 years after it had been erased from history, began to write a new chapter. The Dominion fleet arrived at the Hollow Sun 3 days after humanity's awakening signal reached their sensors, 3,000 warships, the largest force assembled in 100 years, armed with the most advanced weapons the galaxy had ever produced. Admiral Kresh of the Koth species stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Pride, watching the human fleet on his tactical display. He had been given simple orders: destroy the unknown threat before it could spread, ask no questions, leave no survivors. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "the enemy fleet is moving into a defensive formation. They are protecting their civilian vessels." Kresh studied the display. The human ships were old, impossibly old, but there were 12,000 of them, and they moved with a unity that made him uncomfortable. Every ship turned at the same moment, every weapon powered at the same time. It was as if they were not 12,000 ships, but one single organism with 12,000 bodies. "What are our intelligence reports on their capabilities?" Kresh asked. "None, Admiral. Their technology does not match anything in our databases. We do not know how fast they can move, how hard they can hit, or how much damage they can take." Kresh made a decision that he would regret for the rest of his short life. "It does not matter. We outnumber them 3-1, and our weapons are 500,000 years more advanced. All ships, attack!" Commander Yun Han watched the Dominion fleet approach from the bridge of the New Dawn. Beside him, Tactical Officer Shin Dae-jung was running calculations on a display that showed probability fields and quantum states instead of simple targeting data. "They are coming in fast," Dae-jung said. "Standard attack formation, no subtlety." "They think we are primitives," Yun said. "They think our ships are ancient relics." "They are ancient relics, Commander." Yun smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Yes, but we are not." Engineer Choi Nari had explained it to the command staff 3 days ago. During the long sleep, humanity's linked minds had not just been dreaming, they had been evolving. 500,000 years of shared consciousness had changed them in ways that were difficult to describe. They could think faster now. They could see patterns that others missed, and they could connect with each other in ways that made them more than just individuals. Every human in the fleet was linked through their neural implants. Not completely. They still had their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own identities. But when they focused together, when they moved as one, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. "All ships," Yun said calmly, "prepare to demonstrate what 500,000 years of dreaming can achieve." The Battle of Hollow Sun lasted 6 hours. It should not have been a battle at all. The Dominion had more ships, newer weapons, faster engines. On paper, they should have crushed the human fleet in minutes. But war is not fought on paper. The human ships moved like water, flowing around the Dominion's attacks and striking from angles that should have been impossible. Their weapons fired beams of light that seemed to bend space itself, passing through shields as if they did not exist. Their targeting was perfect. Every shot hit exactly where it needed to hit, disabling engines and weapons without destroying entire ships. Admiral Kresh watched in horror as his fleet fell apart around him. His ships could not hit the humans. They moved too fast, changed direction too quickly, predicted every attack before it happened. And when the humans fired back, there was no defense. Their weapons existed partially outside normal space, striking from directions that Kresh's shields were not designed to protect against. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "They are using technology that is 500,000 years old." No one could answer him. No one understood what they were fighting. Tactical Officer Shin Dae-jung sat in the center of the New Dawn's Combat Information Center. His eyes closed. His mind expanded through the neural link to encompass the entire fleet. He could feel every ship, every weapon, every pilot. He could see the battle as a single moment in time, stretching backward into the past and forward into the future. The Dominion's attacks came at him like raindrops, easy to see, easy to avoid. He shifted the fleet like a dancer, sliding past missiles and energy beams, placing his ships exactly where they needed to be. It was not magic. It was not luck. It was simply what humanity had become. 6 hours after the battle began, Admiral Kresh's flagship was surrounded by human vessels. His fleet was destroyed. 2,000 ships crippled or disabled, 1,000 more fleeing into hyperspace. Human losses: 47 ships. 47 out of 800. A communication request appeared on Kresh's screen. He accepted it with trembling hands. The face that appeared was old and tired. Commander Yoon Han looked at the Koth admiral with something that might have been pity. "We did not want this battle," Yoon said. "We told you that we came with a warning, not an invasion. But you did not listen." Kresh said nothing. What was there to say? "The pale tide is returning," Yoon continued. "Our sensors detected their signature at the edge of the galaxy. They will arrive within a century, maybe sooner. When they come, they will not stop until every living thing is dead. We know this because we fought them before, 500,000 years ago. We sacrificed everything to stop them. We thought the galaxy would remember." He paused, and his eyes grew sad. "We were wrong. You forgot us. You erased us. You tried to pretend we never existed." He shook his head slowly. "But that does not matter now. What matters is survival. The pale tide does not care about your dominion or our humanity. It cares only about death, and the only way to stop it is to fight together." Before Kresh could respond, a new voice entered the communication. It was a human woman, old and frail, with white hair and sharp eyes. Her name was Hana, and she was the eldest of the awakened humans, the last survivor of the generation that had fought in the First War. "I remember the old days," she said. "I remember your ancestors, Admiral. The Koth were warriors then, proud and fierce. They fought beside us at the Battle of Orion Vale. They died beside us. When we chose to sleep, they wept." Kresh stared at her. "That is impossible. The Koth have never fought alongside aliens. Our history—" "Your history is a lie," Hana said gently. "Written by those who were afraid. But the truth does not die so easily. It waits, like we waited, for the right moment to return." She leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to look through Kresh into his very soul. "Tell your leaders what you have seen here today. Tell them that the humans have returned. And tell them that we are willing to forgive 500,000 years of silence, if they are willing to stand with us against the darkness." The communication ended. Admiral Kresh sat in silence for a long time. Then, slowly, he began to write a message, not to his military commanders, but to the historians and archivists of the Dominion, to the keepers of forgotten knowledge and sealed archives. It was time to remember what his people had chosen to forget. 1 year had passed since humanity's awakening, and the galaxy had changed more in those 12 months than it had in the previous 100,000 years. Admiral Bayek Sumin stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, humanity's new flagship, and looked out at a sight that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Before her stretched a fleet of over 100,000 ships, and only a fraction of them were human. The Torani had come first. Their leader, a wise old female named Varys, had read the ancient warnings hidden in her people's databases and understood immediately what they meant. "Our ancestors left us a message," she had said when her fleet arrived at the human staging point. "They told us to apologize and to stand with you. We are 500,000 years late, but we are here." The Valesi came next, bringing their vast archives of knowledge and their fleets of science vessels. Then the Koth, their shame transformed into fierce determination. Then species that humanity had never met. New civilizations that had risen after the long sleep, drawn by whispered stories of ancient warriors who had died to save a galaxy that forgot them. 41 species in total. 100,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. And at its heart stood humanity, 12,000 ancient vessels now upgraded with technology born from 500,000 years of dreaming, crewed by men and women who remembered the First War and were determined to win the Second. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "Commander Yoon is requesting to speak with you." Su-min smiled. "Put him through." Yoon Han's face appeared on her screen. He looked old now, older than he should, worn down by a year of endless work and worry. But his eyes were still sharp, and his voice was still strong. "Admiral Beck," he said, "I have just received confirmation from our long-range sensors. The Pale Tide's vanguard has entered the galaxy. They are heading for the Orion Veil." Su-min nodded. "The same route they used 500,000 years ago." "They are creatures of habit," Yoon said, "or perhaps they simply do not expect resistance. The last time they came this way, they destroyed everything in their path." "The last time they came," Su-min said quietly, "we were alone." She turned to look at the fleet spread out before her, the 1,000 different designs, the 100 different species, all united under a single banner. Humans and Terrani and Velesi and Koth, fighting side by side for the first time in 500,000 years. "Order all ships to move to the Orion Veil," she said. "Tell them that today we do not hold the line. Today we push forward." The second battle of Orion Veil began on a morning that had no sunrise. In the deep void between stars, there was no day or night, no up or down. There was only darkness and the pale glow of the enemy and the burning lights of 100,000 ships flying to meet them. The pale tide came like a wave, billions of machine creatures flowing through space, their pale light consuming everything it touched. They had destroyed 1,000 civilizations. They had crossed the gap between galaxies. They did not know fear, and they did not know mercy. But today, for the first time in their ancient existence, they would know defeat. The combined fleet hit them like a hammer. Human ships led the charge, their evolved crews thinking and fighting as one, their weapons slicing through the pale tide's endless ranks. Behind them came the Terrani heavy cruisers, their guns blazing with righteous fury. The Velesi science vessels projected shields that bent the very fabric of space. The Koth warriors screamed battle cries that their ancestors had shouted 500,000 years ago. Su-min stood at the center of it all, her mind linked to every human ship in the fleet, seeing the battle from 1,000 perspectives at once. The pale tide was vast, but it was not infinite. And for every creature they destroyed, its light faded just a little bit more. "All ships," she ordered, "advance. Do not stop. Do not retreat. Push forward until there is nothing left to push against." The battle raged for 3 months. 3 months of constant fighting, of ships destroyed and rebuilt, of species working together who had never even met before. 3 months of sacrifice and courage and stubborn, desperate hope. Commander Yoon Han, now gray and tired, commanded the reserve fleet from the new dawn. He had refused to take a flagship, had refused to stay behind the lines. He was a soldier, he said, and soldiers fought. On the 63rd day, his ship was hit by a pale tide swarm. The damage was severe, engines disabled, weapons failing, hull breached in a dozen places. "All hands, abandon ship," Yoon ordered calmly, but he did not move from his command chair. "Commander," said his first officer, "we need to go." "No," Yoon said. He was looking at his tactical display, watching the battle flow around him. "There is a gap in their formation. If I can hold this position for 10 more minutes, the Terrani fleet can push through and flank their main body." "You will die." Yoon smiled. It was the smile of a man who had made peace with his fate a long time ago. "I have been ready to die for 500,000 years, Lieutenant. I was ready at the Battle of Orion Veil," when I watched Admiral Kang lead the last charge. I was ready when I entered the stasis pod. I am ready now." He activated his communication system one final time. "Admiral Bayek, this is Commander Yoon. I am holding position at Grid 774. You have 10 minutes. Make them count." 10 minutes later, the T'Rani fleet broke through the Pale Tide's flank. The enemy's formation shattered. And for the first time in their eternal existence, the machines of the Pale Tide began to retreat. Yoon Han's ship exploded in a flash of light that outshone the stars. The war did not end that day. It took 3 more months of fighting, of pushing the Pale Tide back through the Orion Veil, of chasing them to the edge of the galaxy and beyond. But on the 90th day, the last Pale Tide creature fled into the void between galaxies, and the guns fell silent. 6 months later, on a world that had been chosen for its beauty, a monument was unveiled. It was a simple thing, a wall of white stone covered in names. Every human who had died in both wars, the old and the new. Every Allied soldier who had fallen in the second battle. The names stretched on and on, millions of them, too many to read in a single lifetime. Scholar O.G. Wan, now ancient and frail, read the inscription that had been carved at the top of the wall. Humanity asked for nothing but the chance to protect those who could not protect themselves. They asked only that we remember. This time, we will. Admiral Baek Soo-min placed her hand on the stone, her fingers tracing the name of Commander Yoon Han. Beside her stood representatives of all 41 Allied species, their heads bowed in respect. "He would have hated this," she said softly. "All this ceremony, all this attention." "Yes," said Hana, the last of the original sleepers. "But he would have understood why it matters. Memory is not about the dead. It is about the living. It is about making sure that we never forget what sacrifice truly means." Soo-min looked up at the stars. The Pale Tide was gone, driven back into the darkness between galaxies. But she knew they would return someday, in 1,000 years, or 1,000,000, or 1,000,000,000. Evil did not die. It only waited, but so did humanity. "We will be ready," she said. "However long it takes, however many times they return, we will be here." The monument gleamed in the starlight. And for the first time in 500,000 years, the galaxy remembered.